Hey, everybody. Okay, happy Thursday. I am re-recording our topics from today because I was having a little bit of tech issue during the coaching call itself. So I am going to just discuss the points that we talked about during the mindset call since it did not get recorded. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to talk about two things today. One, we discussed about protein and serving sizes of protein and something to do with weights and measures, which I'm going to talk about. And then we're going to do a little bit of the mindset work. If you guys had seen my Facebook post yesterday about donuts and how to manage that situation, that's going to be our mindset piece of it. So I'm going to start with the protein piece of it. So this would be like Paul's call. For those of you who are new, we have our Tuesday coach call, 6:30 that Paul does. And that is mostly sort of fitness, nutrition, the questions that go to that, and kind of like maintenance stuff about your app and where do I find this, or is there a document, or can I read something, blah blah blah. Those questions, those kind of go on the 6:30 call, but not limited to, just mostly. And then the Thursday call, I usually do a 10-minute presser about mindset. So in the past, I have gone over and done like a few minutes on wins and talking about how to help you guys a little bit through wins, filling out that form, learn your language. Paul also has a learn your language video contained in your coaching section as well. So you can look that up if you want to see that as well. But sort of things like that. So if they're kind of very tangible things of like, hey, how much protein is in an ounce of chicken, which I'm going to get to. And that's kind of like a nutrition question. And if you're like, you know what, every time I walk into a room and there's cookies on the counter, I eat them no matter what. And that would be a mindset question where you talk about that. Okay, on Thursday. So we'll do our Paul call on about protein. So what we want to do is always, kind of think about the amount of protein that you're eating. So in the beginning of our program, we don't get super detailed on what you are eating. We want you to just start to pay attention to it yourself. We want you to be journaling it, keeping it track using MyFitnessPal if you want to, or anything else, but MyFitnessPal syncs with our app. So that's kind of convenient if you want us to be able to look at it on a fairly regular basis. So we want you to be able to be tracking it so that you're kind of being accountable to what you're eating, writing it down, that whole process. And then we can also kind of over the first couple of weeks understand the pattern in which you're eating, and we get a good sense of what you're doing and maybe some of the things that we want to start to work on, because not everybody's going to work on the same stuff first, right? So that's why we don't get too overly invested into the nutrition portion immediately. So as you are moving through some of that, maybe like 3 or 4, and again, there's no deadline or timeline, but at some point we're going to give you how much protein and how many overall calories to be eating. We focus on the protein because it's going to get the job done. And one of the things that we want to try to understand and express in this program is that, like, you don't need to hit everything 100% to the absolute detail if it's screwing you up. Okay. So obviously we want to attain our goal. We want to get there. Consistency. We want 100%. Okay. But if we're overthinking something, like, is my form spot on? If it's 98% of the way there, you're fine. If your nutrition is 98% of the way there, you're fine. So maybe even 90. Don't split hairs on the percentages either. So that's why we kind of just do it this way. When thinking about protein, the amount of protein that you are taking in, it's going to keep you full longer, and it does provide a lot of the amino acids that you're going to need to repair, to build muscle. And by simply focusing on the amount of protein that you're eating, you are likely displacing some of the other foods that we don't want you to be eating, or in that kind of amount or frequency. So when you always focus on protein, there's a whole list of reasons why that's going to be beneficial to you without having to overthink and analyze and collect tons and tons of data. It's just more simple. And what we want to do is keep things more simple. So you're focusing on the protein. One of the questions that came up was, if we're talking about grams of protein, you weigh a piece of chicken, it might come in at like 100 grams. Is that 100 grams of protein? So that is 100 grams of chicken, right? The chicken itself weighs 100 grams. So it's not 100 grams of protein, it's 100 grams of chicken. As a rule of thumb, for most animal proteins, chicken, turkey, pork, beef's a little bit higher, fish, slightly less, half a gram less. But roughly for all of those animal source proteins, we say that there's approximately 7 grams of protein per ounce, right? So if you have 1 ounce of chicken, it's 7 grams. 2 ounces of chicken, 14 grams of protein. So typically a portion is somewhere around 3 or 4 ounces, depending on what your requirements are and how much you weigh and your caloric needs. So somewhere between 3 and 4 ounces for the most part. Most of us, it's not, fast. Most of us will lay in that bell curve of 3 to 4 ounces of protein. So it's going to be like 21 to 28 grams of protein per meal. So if you can get that at 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's about 90 grams. And if you can get yourself a couple of grams of protein into your AM snack and your PM snack, you're probably in the ballpark, again, depending on how many overall calories you need, your size, that kind of thing. So if you can focus it on that, that's going to be fairly beneficial for you to achieve that. So and then again, just to reiterate, we are making sure that the weight of whatever it is that you have, that's separate from the actual grams of protein contained within whatever it is. Plant proteins are typically a little bit less. Doesn't mean that they're, not great and that they don't count. They do. They just probably have anywhere between, vegetables can be low, but if you're talking about a legume or a grain, it could be like, 3 or 4 grams per serving. So they're just a little bit less. Okay. So focus on, and if you're plant-based, totally fine. We just need to focus a little bit more so on getting in that protein for sure. And it can be tricky. And most of you who are vegetarian, I know that we've talked about how to go through that. So maybe that might be another presser if we still have some questions on it. Just put in your question and Paul can talk about that next week. And we do have some resources to help vegetarians make sure that they are getting in the right amount of protein and all the other nutrients that they should be getting as well. Now moving on to the second piece of it, which is part of our mindset piece of our coach call, was yesterday I had a coach conversation and then I did a live Facebook video on it about sort of the situation that I was discussing specifically was that somebody had gone back to work and there were like somebody brought in donuts because yay, now we're back in person, we want to see everybody, and there's baked goods galore. So now I'm trying to stay on point and be focused, and now there's like tons of baked goods in the break room and they're just calling your name all day as you sit there, and so you can't focus and there's all this business. So how do we manage that? The topic that I wanted to kind of just flesh out with that a little bit was that, you have to develop a skill set to be around foods that you didn't plan on eating and not eat them. Okay. But it doesn't necessarily mean that like for the rest of your life, you're going to walk into a room and see cookies and be like, I'm not eating those, because that's not very healthy either. So as a lifestyle, you want to be able to be in control and decide on your own, like, oh, thank God they have like my favorite cookies here today. Didn't really plan on having one, but I'm going to have one and it's fine. And that's how your life goes. Right. But in order to get to that point, you do need to develop some skill sets in order to execute that plan. So in the beginning, the skill set that you might have to develop is like, I can't eat any of that today. That's not happening. And I've got to figure out skills to walk by this break room, whether it's just a hard, fast rule of like, I'm not eating that. Or sometimes we've done, somebody's going into the kitchen, and just like, oh, look, I'm in the kitchen, I'm going to grab a snack. Every time you go into the kitchen, 20 jumping jacks. By the time you finish your 20 jumping jacks, you're under control and you're like, okay, I'm not really hungry, I can walk out, right? So you might be doing that each time you walk by the break room. So we want to develop some kind of skill set that says like, I'm in control and I'm not going to just interrupt that whole, that 3-step of a, of a habit. We need to interrupt so that you don't go and seek the reward, right? We see it, it triggers us to go do something, walk toward it and eat it as the reward, right? Step 3. So we need to interrupt that whole pattern. So jumping jacks, walk the other way, go get some water, whatever it is that will work for you in that particular situation is what you want to do. But I can't stress enough that that does not mean for the rest of your life you need to avoid baked goods, pizzas, all these other foods. We're developing skill sets for you to use when you need them so that you can move through life eating these foods. And really, that is sort of almost like the crux of what we're talking about, right? So some of those skill sets that we need to develop, they've got a lot of behaviors attached to them. So when we talk about it, for some people, it might be like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. And this is what I'm going to do. And you might be able to execute that a little bit more easily. And some people may have some other things attached to that. And we can delve more into that if you have some mindset questions around that. If you feel like you're trying certain things and that's not really working out, put in your mindset question and we can review how to move forward and just explore some other strategies to help you get that initial skill set down. And then this is sort of, as I said, my example or analogy yesterday was that, we don't need, we go to school and we go to math class and we learn algebra, but we don't have to do algebra every day. And then I was thinking, at least I hope we don't have to do algebra every single day. I don't in my life, but there are some times when I'm doing some research or whatever, and I've had to go back and grab that tool of algebra and get it to the forefront. And it was there. Now, if I didn't learn it, I wouldn't have it, and I would have to figure out what to do on the fly, and I wouldn't be able to solve the problem that's in front of me effectively because I didn't have that tool that I hopefully remembered, right? So it's the same thing. We want to develop tools that we can rely on, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be doing them every single day. So we're not avoiding foods. We're not putting things on the never eat list. We are working on skill development. Okay, so those are the 2 things that we discussed in our call earlier. Again, sorry for that tech, but I think I covered all of the major points in that. And yeah, okay. So have a great Thursday, everybody. And please do let me know if you have any follow-up questions on our mindset coaching for the week.